And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of Doing the Work, the first show on the Back Home Network covering IU women's basketball. This is our 120th episode, recorded on Wednesday, June 19th, 2024. I'm your host, Jeff Marlow, and joined tonight by my co-host, Kathy Amos. And tonight, we're also joined by our special guest, Austin Render. But as always, we'll start our show off with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And tonight, Kathy and Austin, I'm going to kind of go off campus a little bit here for the Hoosier Proud banner moment. Coach Terry Morin, head coach of the U18 USA teams, is in action, and they've gone 3-0 so far. They've won against Brazil, Puerto Rico, and Mexico. So again, Coach Morin being the head coach of the U18 team for the USA women's national team. Off to an outstanding start. And again, what a great recognition for Coach Morin and the program at Indiana that she was selected to be the head coach of that team. Our banner moment is brought to you by Home Field Apparel, presenting sponsor of the Back Home Network, who includes the Assembly Call and Crimson Cast. Home Field is constantly releasing new schools or updating their products for schools in their existing line. You are bound to find something for you or anyone in your life that just loves great collegiate gear. Not only do you get quality apparel, but you're supporting an Indiana-based business that has its roots in the Kelley School of Business. Go to homefieldapparel.com and use our promo code HOME23, that's HOME23, HOME23, to get 15% off your entire first order. That's promo code HOME23 for 15% off. Once again, the website is homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. And in some news for IU around through the summer here, the off season, freshman Faith Wiseman is finally, she came to campus a little bit late. She was participating in the Indiana All-Star Series with Kentucky. In the first game, she had 2 points, 7 rebounds in 21 minutes, then went on to score 10 points, 8 rebounds in 26 minutes in game 2, with Indiana getting the sweep over the Kentucky All-Stars. Also a reminder, our last podcast, we brought this up real quick at the end. Sarah Scalia's Elite Shooting Clinic on Sunday, June 23rd, 6 to 8 p.m. at the Twin Lakes Rec Center in Bloomington. Cost is $75 and is limited to 60 spots. So there may be very few, if any, spots left, but we do want to get that out there for Sarah on that. IU released their APR score across the athletic department. The score was 991. Possible score is 1,000, with 13 programs earning a perfect 1,000 score, including the women's basketball program. As I mentioned, the newcomers have arrived on campus. Caroline Strickland, Shay Chesky, and Sydney Finn, along with Faith Wiseman. We're going to actually talk with Austin about those four here in a few minutes. And this is not IU or Big Ten related, but it was something that I want to kind of get Austin's feelings on as we get a little bit later. And Kathy, kind of get your thoughts maybe as we go into the Amos angle. There were a lot of hints that maybe this guy might be thinking a little bit shorter term toward retirement, but it was announced a couple weeks ago. Gino Auriemma in UConn announced a 5-year contract extension. So interesting that Gino was willing to sign back up for 5 years. So let's move it over to Kathy and let's get her thoughts from the Amos angle.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Jeff, and good evening, Austin, and everyone who's listening live or whatever time of the day is you might be listening. So welcome, Austin, not only to our podcast, but to the Back Home Network. So I think this might be a good place to plug a new podcast that Austin just dropped his first episode of out there with Megan McGowan here earlier this week, called Durable Drive. Excuse me. It's going to be, we'll let Austin talk about it later here in a minute once we jump over to him in a second. But yeah, for those of you who haven't given a listen, I would highly encourage it. I listened the first day that it was out on my podcast feed and I really enjoyed it. So welcome, Austin, officially to Back Home Network. So, but real quick before I guess I'll kick it over to Austin, I did want to just, mention, how exciting it is for Coach Morin to get her face out there, I think, and be the head coach this year of that U18 team. And, I know you mentioned they opened up 3-0, but some of the scores here were quite impressive, too, if you haven't seen it. So they beat Brazil on the 17th, 97-51, Puerto Rico on the 18th, 102-22. And then just earlier today, they beat Mexico 115-20. So a couple pretty lopsided scores there for the U.S. U18 team. So not only is that great for, our country and the future of our women's basketball program, but also great for Coach Morin, I think, with being able to get her face out there. She's pretty well associated now with our program, and hopefully that might get a little trickle in from maybe some of these ladies later on with recruiting. So just really exciting to see that, and as well as Faith Wiseman participating in that All-Star game. So just a couple of my quick thoughts to kick us off here tonight, Jeff.
Oh, Kathy, thanks for bringing that into it. Let's bring it over to Austin. And again, Kathy brought it up that Austin is now a member of the Back Home Network with the Dribble Drive podcast. And so, Austin, congratulations on the podcast. And just kind of get your initial thoughts and talk about the podcast a little bit.
Yeah, guys, thank you for having me, and thank you for the plug. We started on Monday with our first episode of the Dribble Drive. Megan McEwen of the Big Ten Network joining us, and she was a wonderful guest to kind of kick us off. We were able to kind of do a fast-paced round robin of the league. My goal is to kind of have the entire Big Ten in some form or fashion covered, or at least most of it or more of it. It feels like that the past few years have been very Caitlin Clark centric, and obviously she deserved a lot of attention, but I want to make sure, there's so many good teams in this league, and we've added 4 more good ones coming in from the West Coast. So my goal is just to kind of really hit on everything that's going on in the league. I like kind of that 30-minute mark on the episodes right now. I think it's just a nice thing for people in their commutes, maybe to work. Maybe it's just a thing you tune into. Mondays at 7 is when each episode will drop. We will get to doing those live here at some point, but excited for the guests that we've got lined up here over the next couple of weeks, and excited to give us some basketball to chat about, even though it's the middle of June. And it's just, we're all, I know you guys are the same way as me, just born to love basketball. And even in June and July, can't get enough of it. So I came out of that episode with Megan just fired up for the season, fired up for what's to come. Kathy, I liked what you said about Coach Morin getting the head coaching job. I do think that is a big deal. One of the things that's changed in the landscape of basketball, but any sport, is that you recruit somebody in high school, that relationship is still important even if they don't go to your school, because they could come back. The transfer portal is a whole new ball game, and somebody like, I know Striplin was somebody that Indiana had ties with before she chose to go to Tennessee, and they used those ties when she entered the portal to bring her to Indiana. So even if some of these players that Coach Morin is coaching right now, even if they're not committed to Indiana, those are relationships that could prove valuable if any of them do end up wanting to switch schools at some point in their career.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah, Austin, a couple things there. One, I did not realize that about Striplin, that they'd had a relationship with her before. So that's interesting to find out. And secondly, kind of get back to what you brought up and about your podcast, but let's kind of get into what we wanted to talk with you a little bit about here in the podcast. You talked about Caitlin Clark graduating, but now I don't want to say a bad thing, but it almost seems like it's going to be Juju Watkins centric, doesn't it?
It does. I do think that it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how much the LA schools poll, because I still think that many of the Midwestern Big Ten fans are going to have a long adjustment period to realizing that USC is even in the conference. And so, because I had that, I think Megan and I were talking toward the end of the pod, and I said something about, I think the player of the year race is wide open. And I listed off a couple of players, and I didn't list Juju. And then Megan, of course, mentioned her, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, she's in the Big Ten now." But I mean, her teammate Kiki Iriafen could be the number 1 pick in next year's WNBA draft. So there's a solid 1-2 punch. They're definitely, not definitely, but I would say the preseason favorites in the conference. And so it's going to take some getting used to. But you're right, it could be a very heavy Juju load, but. I mean, there's just players all over this conference that you bring in Lucy Olson from Villanova, who now joins Iowa. She's going to have something to say about that. Deja Kelly joins Oregon, which is a really intriguing one there. She obviously was a terrific player at North Carolina. And then I think a very under the radar transfer was Kayleen Schmeichel of Rutgers going to Maryland. Brenda Fries did what she usually does, and she stockpiled in the transfer portal. And one of those was an in-conference transfer in Schmeichel, who is a very, very good player. So there's all sorts of big names around the conference. It's a wide open race, I think, you got Lauren Betts at UCLA. I'm certainly missing some, I'm sure, but this is going to be an extremely competitive conference. And I'm hopeful that it's not Juju Watkins centered, and that's not a shot at Juju. And my previous statement was not a shot at Caitlin Clark. I just believe that there is more than one person in this conference, and now there's 18 teams. That's what? Do quick math, 90 starters around the league. That's a lot of people to talk about and a lot of people worth being talked about. And that's the whole purpose of my podcast. One of the things I like to do when I prepare for games is try and find local newspaper articles, local podcasts, because those are people who watch the team more than anybody. And I just felt like that was lacking a little bit in women's basketball right now. And obviously we're in the best time, and a lot of that is to Caitlin Clark and what she did for the attention, the eyeballs on the league. But women's basketball is having its best moment right now. And I just felt like it was time that we start to offer some extra coverage to a league that has put 7 teams in the tournament the last 2 years and adds 4 more really, really good teams.
Kathy?
Yeah, I agree with everything Austin said, both on your podcast on Monday and what you said just now, which is I agree. Juju Watkins, I got to watch Juju a little bit last year, not a whole lot. I'm sure we'll see her a lot more now that she is in conference, but you're right, Austin. How many times have, Jeff, you and I have been on our podcast going, oh yeah, it's hard to remember to say USC and UCLA or Oregon oh, it just feels weird to say that. I see that comment all over, Twitter or wherever, pick your pleasure that you have for discussing Indiana basketball. It is hard to get your head around and to remember that. And it'll probably be like that until we really get into the meat of the Big Ten season this year, and probably getting through the conference season. And then maybe once that all settles in, we'll have that. But I agree with your comments on Juju, especially. She was really exciting and dynamic to watch, and she's going to be again. But I agree. I hope she does not jump right back into the exact same media spotlight that Caitlin Clark had, just because it would be nice to not go in with a predetermined person for Big Ten Player of the Year. There are too many other good players out there that don't get enough conversation when somebody is really getting all of that attention. And I think it is an underservice to all of their talents as well. So like you said, 90 starters, we should be talking about more than just a handful, 1 or 2 or 3 of them. So I hope that is definitely going to change this coming year for sure.
You think about JC Sheldon was a top 5 pick in the WNBA.
Right.
And her season was so good and it went so under the radar. That's the Big Ten champions with a top 5 pick in the WNBA draft that just got nothing. Right. And I know a lot of us were frustrated with not frustrated, but wanted more attention on Mackenzie. And then that's fair. And Sarah and Mackenzie and the numbers they were putting up. But JC Sheldon's one that's like, man, what a great year she had last year. I don't think it was talked about enough. I think she was coming back from injury. She may have just kind of been forgotten a little bit because she didn't play for most of the season before. But she's one that is just a perfect example of why we need more spotlights on this conference, because one of them is not enough. Caitlin Clark was great, but so was JC Sheldon. So was Mackenzie Holmes. So was Sarah Scalia. So were many others in this league. So hopefully that changes this year.
Yeah, I agree.
Kathy, you got a question for Austin?
No, maybe just, maybe let's digress a little bit, Austin. So switching our focus now to mainly Indiana, how are your quick overall thoughts from last season? Jeff and I did our own season recap last year. I know with you, we were able to have the watch party, but before the tournament, and got a little bit of thoughts there, but just in general, now that you've had some time to digest, what are some overarching thoughts that you have from last year that you want everyone to try to remember as we continue on with the off season?
Yeah, I think that it was a really, really positive season. I think at times this was kind of the first time maybe in the Terry Morin era, and this is what expectations and success will do. The first time maybe in the Terry Morin era that there was actually some grumbling from the fan base. Certainly, I think back to the loss to Illinois. And that was one of those that kind of felt like it took you out of the Big Ten title race. It felt like it took you kind of potentially out of the hosting race. Of course, they were able to get back into that. But I think that was the first time that you, which again, it's good because that means you're getting attention on your team. But it felt like the first time that there was any sort of like doubting about where this team was at. And they obviously finished. They beat Iowa in the next game and finished the season well, got to the tournament, hosted, and got to the Sweet 16. So I think all in all, it's a very, very positive season. It's one that will go down with what Holmes and Scalia did last year as one of the more successful in program history. And again, I've said this to everybody who's asked me about that South Carolina game. If that game's 42 minutes long, the Hoosiers are winners. I'd stand by that. It was an avalanche that started a bit too late, but they played so well in that second half. And honestly, the people who played the best, Sydney Parrish, Chloe Moore-McNeil, are coming back. And they're going to have fifth years. And I think people are extremely excited about that. So many positives. I mean, I don't want to be like the guy who is like, I don't want to sit up here and be like, we should have been in the Final Four type of situation. I think Sweet 16s, that's kind of the expectation at this point with this program. You should be a host school. You should be a Sweet 16, but that doesn't mean that we should be disappointed that they didn't get out, that they didn't win. I thought it was a really, really positive season that gives Terry Morin and company more to build on.
And Austin, I know you don't maybe, I guess I should preface this a little bit. I don't know how much you get to see during the summer or here when you're in Bloomington, but just kind of maybe some thoughts on some of the newcomers. We talked about the portal with Caroline Striplin and Shay Chesky, but you also bring in high school seniors to be freshmen, Faith Wiseman and Sydney Finn. Just if anything you've heard or maybe anything you've seen about some of those four newcomers.
Yeah, I have not been around the program at all this summer, so Finn and Wiseman are still new to me. I'll get a look at them when they do fall practice. But I'm super excited about the transfers. I think that Shay Chesky is the one that got me jumping out of my seat. I was fired up about that one. I think when you think about the role that Chloe Moore-McNeil has had to play during the Graceberger injury period, and then, of course, all of last season, which is the point guard and the number one assignment defensively. That's a lot of energy exuded throughout a basketball game to guard the best player and face the other team's pressure as you try to take the ball up the floor and run the offense. I think Shay Chesky can take some of that pressure off of Chloe, can run the point a little bit. She's a quick guard, dynamic, can shoot. I think Indiana at times lacked speed last year.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was put on display against Michigan State. It was put on display against Illinois. Guards with quick downhill speed got Indiana into a lot of trouble. And offensively, they didn't have, I mean, it's only been 1 year, but since Graceberger, they haven't had that kind of dynamic get to the basket guard. Chloe can do it. It's just not really the strength of her game. Shay Chesky is quick, and I think that's going to help both defensively and offensively, creating driving lanes, driving kicks, opportunities for others, allow Chloe to play a little bit off the ball at times. I think it's going to open up the offense a little bit. I'm super excited. Her points per game, I think, was around 9 or 10 points a game last year at Penn State. It was extremely streaky. Megan mentioned that on our podcast, that she would have games where she'd score 25 to 30 points, but then she'd have games where she'd get 2 or 3 shots and score 4 points. So hopefully within this Indiana offense, she gets a little bit more consistent role. On a Penn State team with Owusu and Marisa, that's a lot of shots that you're giving up to those two. So I think that Chesky will fit like a glove with this system. I think it's going to be a great addition. Caroline Striplin's another one that I just think is a solid pickup. I think she and Meister can kind of man the 5 position. I don't know who will start between those two, but I would assume that they will share the role and kind of share the load, which I think is great. I think at times, obviously, the load was heavy on Mackenzie the last 4 years. And so it's helpful to not have to tell Lily that she has to go out there and play 35 minutes a game. This way, they can kind of both play in the 20 to 29-minute range, somewhere in there, and keep themselves fresh, hopefully, for the grueling Big Ten season and into March, which I think is a huge positive for this team going forward. She's a veteran. She's played in the SEC. She's played some of the best teams in the country. She's played in the NCAA tournament. She's scouted this Indiana team, so she knows what she's getting into. Had connections with the Hoosiers before her time at Tennessee. So I think it all just works really well for Striplin and Chesky to fit right in with this team. And I just think they're set up to be extremely deep, because you look at Lexi Bargesser's back. They didn't have a single transfer out of the program. I believe at least a month or two ago, they were one of 5 in the Power 5 ranks to not have anybody. Yeah. And so Lexi Bargesser's back. Lily Meister, as we mentioned, is back. The 2 freshmen turned sophomores, Juliana Lamendola and Lene Beaumont, are back. Hannah Sandvik is back. Charnice Curry-Jelks says she'll be back and ready to go this year. So there's a lot of depth to this team, and that's something that Terry Morin hasn't necessarily had, dependable depth. And again, the dependable part is still to be proven, but there is certainly depth that can be established for this team, which I think is going to be a huge help come March. If you can play 8 to 9 people, keep your starters fresh, and allow them to be at their best physically and mentally when the tournament comes around.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and with that, Kathy, go ahead. I think I took the last question.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of build off of what Austin was talking about. And I think we had a question from Valerie in our Substack feed asking, with the departure of our talent within Mackenzie and Sarah, how do you see the team kind of filling that? Because I don't think we're going to have another, all-star coming off or starting for us. As much as I love Lily and like what I see from Caroline, I don't see either of them 100% filling the stat bucket like they did. Shay, I think, probably could shoot pretty well, and she has similar stats to Sarah Scalia. So maybe she projects to fill that hole, but still you have 2 very good, 5-year players, one of them being our all-time leading scorer in program history. How do you think that the team and the program is going to replace that kind of talent in production?
Well, it's important to know that you're not just going to insert peg for a peg, you're not just going to insert another Sarah Scalia and another Mackenzie Holmes. I mean, I think a lot about what Iowa's got to do this year. You bring in Lucy Olson from Villanova, but nobody is ever going to be Caitlin Clark. And so you have to find a new way to fill those shoes kind of by committee. Maybe it's a different style of play. Indiana had to do this last year with Grace Berger. They lost her, and Chloe and Sid and Yarden and obviously Sarah all stepped up, made themselves better, and kind of filled it by committee. And that's where, can they get a year 3 jump out of Yarden? That's the big one to me, because she has the ceiling of first team All Big Ten. She can be that good. Can they get that out of her here in her junior season? I think what we've seen from Sydney Parrish is what you're going to get, and that's a good thing. I don't know if there's a whole bunch of she's going to step into the Sarah Scalia role. I think what she does is what she does best. You know what you're going to get out of Sydney Parrish. Chloe, I think you saw the big jump last year. I think that she'll continue to be a steady. I don't think there's a huge jump there, but I do think it's just kind of little jumps. It's little things. It's can Lene and Jules come off the bench and step into bigger roles? Can Lexi continue to be kind of that backup point guard that she's been the past couple of years? And then at the 5 position, no, you don't have a Mackenzie Holmes, and that those Mackenzie Holmes don't grow on trees. If they did, that'd be nice. But you got to find a way to just get some production out of those 2. If one of them could average double-digit points, you need them. To me, the biggest thing is the rebounding, because you're going to get scoring from your guards. I feel very confident and comfortable with the guard play on this team. Can you get 5 to 8 rebounds a game out of both Striplin and Meister, because that's where Holmes, she averaged about 7 a game, but even then it felt like it could have been a little better. And so that's what I'm hoping for from Striplin and Meister. And Lily has kind of averaged in the 3 rebounds a game range in her career. With more playing time, can she grab 5, 6, 7, 8 rebounds a game? Have Striplin come off the bench, do the same? That's where I think this team can kind of fill the shoes a little bit more, because I think the guards are going to pick up the slack in the scoring.
I want to follow up with that a little bit on Lily, Austin, as well. I really believe Lily's numbers. And I think for me, and I want to get your thoughts for Lily, can she stay out of foul trouble? Because it seems like she's good for at least one moving screen a game. And I think that's something that's got to be cleaned up. But and again, that's being a little ticky tack as a former coach. That boggles my mind that game after game, it seemed like, but I really think she has the capability to pick up some of the stats with more minutes. From that standpoint, if you looked at some of her shooting numbers on some of the more advanced stuff, what she was scoring, if you would stretch that out over like 40 minutes and her shooting percentage, she was one of the best in the country in terms of, but she wasn't getting that many minutes. And we all know why. That's not a negative on her or anything else. But so kind of, you mentioned Lily a little bit, but one I want to kind of get your thoughts on is when you mentioned that's Lene. And it's not that I'm trying to just not talk about any of the others, but we had Lene on a couple weeks ago. She's such a great ambassador for the program, but I really believe she could be in the couple, not this coming year, but as a junior, she could be that person that we see make that third year jump. Just maybe what's your thoughts about Lene and possibly a little bit about Jules too?
I think you could see it this year for Lene. Everything I've heard from the people in the program is that she's got an offensive game that is ready to explode. The big thing with Lene is can she provide defensively enough to where you can keep her on the floor? That was her issue last year, and it's many freshmen's issue, is picking up the speed of Big Ten play and being able to defend at a high level. That can hit you hard as a freshman. A lot of people have that. So I would imagine, knowing, like you said, how smart she is, how she's got a great head on her shoulders, she seems to understand this program, and to play in this program, you have to defend. That's a Terry Moran staple. You have to be able to defend. And so my guess is, with her being an intelligent basketball player, she knew this offseason she had to get better defensively. My guess is she put a lot of time in on that, and still is here in June. And if she can give you sufficient defense, everything I've heard and everything I've seen in practice is that she has got an offensive game that you got to get it on the floor. You got to put her out there. You saw it at times last year. She had some sweet spin moves, some good finishes through contact. She's a good mid-range shooter. People have said she's got a very similar game to Grace Berger. And so if she can get there defensively, I truly think she could be a 6th or 7th man that becomes very valuable. You might even get me by September saying she's going to be the Big Ten 6th woman of the year. I think she could be that good this year for Indiana. For Juliana, I think it's important. I thought she last year was kind of the stat sheet stuffer. She could kind of she was a great rebounder, not afraid to get her nose dirty, get in there, get involved in the glass. And I think that can be where her role is. She may not have a super potent offensive game. She may average 4 or 5 points a game, but if she can average 4 or 5 rebounds a game, and again, to me, it's all about keeping Sydney Parrish and Yarden Garzon fresh, keeping them from that injury, keeping them from running out of steam in March. And that's where, if you can get 10 to 15 minutes out of Juliana every game, giving them some rest, that's where they become fresher for fourth quarters, for February, for March, into the postseason.
So another question, kind of along the same vein, and revisiting again, going back to, how do we replace McKenzie's production? We were talking about defense. We didn't really talk about how we replace McKenzie on defense. Again, do you think that there's going to be much of a drop off now with Lily and Caroline in terms of our download defensive presence? And that's maybe not a fair question, because we know McKenzie was not last year, but her first senior year, I guess, if you want to call it that, was, a defensive player of the year. So those are big shoes to jump in and fill. So the question is not so much do we think they can fill it, but more like how big of a drop off is that an area of concern maybe we should have going into the season is kind of maybe our post defense.
Yeah, I might have a better answer for that in October when I get to see him a little bit more. See
You don't
how
have
Lily
a great
is
answer
moving.
on June 19th.
What I would say is that part of post defense comes from, I don't want to say lack of guard defense, but sometimes you make your posts
Yeah.
look better defensively when you're not as great at the top of the key and guards are getting past you, which forces Mac to step in and get some of those blocks. And thank goodness she did. She was an elite shot blocker. But if Indiana can be better defending the ball around the perimeter and defending straight line drives, which was something I think I heard in just about every interview I did with Coach Moore last year, was we got to be better at straight line drive defense. I think with Chesky and Chloe getting the two best guards on each team, that's going to really help that. And I do think one thing this team will miss is Sarah Scalia's improved defense. I think that was something that went under the radar last year. But again, I think that's where Lexi can step in. I thought she was a great defender last year. So you got her, you got Chesky, you've got Chloe, and then you hope that Lene comes along defensively at that 1 and 2 position. And then you feel good about Juliana maybe giving you some minutes at the 3 and 4. But if your guards can defend better, it puts less pressure on Lily and Caroline to be that elite shot blocker because you just can't step in and immediately become Mackenzie Holmes. Like you said, Kathy, she's Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year 2 years ago. So you got to just take a little bit of pressure off of them by hopefully improving that guard defense.
Austin, I know we don't know the complete schedule yet, but what did you think? I thought the IU actually got a pretty good break on the Big Ten portion of the schedule. Most of what we think will be the top teams in the league seem to be coming to Bloomington, but kind of get your thoughts, at least as far as the home and away part of the schedule that we at least know so far.
Yeah, I would say that anybody, the way they were doing it, for those who haven't been kind of made aware of how they were doing the scheduling with the 4 new teams, you're either going to LA to play those 2 or the Pacific Northwest to play Oregon and Washington. There was no crossover there. So either the LA schools are coming to you or you're going there, and it's a package deal. So anybody who drew the LA schools coming to them was a huge break for those teams. And Indiana, of course, was one of those because UCLA and USC are going to be preseason probably top 10 teams in the country. Might be 1 and 2. Yeah, might be 1 and 2 in the preseason Big Ten rankings. So
easily the favorites in the Big Ten. Yeah.
Yeah. So to not have to go there and not have to go to LA for either of those games on the road is a huge break for anybody. And of course, for Indiana being one of those teams, that is the one that really stood out to me. Not having to go to Illinois is a helpful one because we have struggled at Illinois. We certainly saw that last year. Not having to go to Ohio State is certainly helpful. Not having to go to Nebraska, which is such a tough place to play, is extremely helpful. Obviously, not getting Iowa at home is a bummer. But like you said, you think about the top teams in the Big Ten. You think about UCLA, you think about USC, Ohio State, Nebraska, Maryland. They're all coming to Bloomington. So that certainly is on paper a favorable schedule, but still not going to be easy to beat UCLA and USC at home. But you've got a better shot at it with a jam-packed Simon Scott Assembly Hall, which I'm sure it will be. So there's definitely anybody who drew that side of the draw gets the benefit of the doubt for sure. I'll just be curious to see what the schedules look like for the West Coast schools. What's it going to look like for them? How many trips are they making west to east? How often are they playing a game on the East Coast and staying there maybe for a week before they go back? I'm very curious how all that's going to work for them. Like, does Indiana draw USC on like a Thursday after they played Purdue on Monday? Right. Like, is that something that's going to happen here to where you could catch somebody on tired legs or just tired in general because you're not in your normal ecosystem in a different time zone? So that's the part that's most intriguing to me is what do the schedules look like for UCLA, USC, Oregon, and Washington?
Yeah. Yeah. So continuing on this scheduled question. So this is more from you personally. So you mentioned USC and UCLA are coming to town. Stanford is coming to town. We're going to have some new venues to go to in terms of Oregon and Washington. For you personally, since you are, I'm assuming, traveling with the team as well, but either a home game or an away game, what are some of the ones that you personally are looking forward to? Maybe because it's a team you get to see in person, maybe a repeat team you've seen the Big Ten teams, or a venue you haven't been to before that you're really looking forward to, or a combination of those. Or there's some that really stick out for you?
Yeah, I mean, the West Coast ones stand out to me. I think that hosting those two teams is going to be awesome, the two LA teams. And then going to the Pacific Northwest, that's a part of the country I've never been. I'm sure we'll draw it in the deep winter.
Yes,
And there'll be like 6 feet of snow on the ground, and I won't be able to go explore. But I am excited to go out to Oregon and go out to Seattle and see those campuses, see those schools, those arenas, which I've never been to. I've heard there's a rumor that the Oregon court is being changed to where there's not trees on it anymore.
I heard that too.
So that would be cool. But I would say I'm always excited to go to Carver Hawkeye Arena. They have a great crowd. I know people don't want to hear that. The Hoosier fans don't, but they do have a great crowd. Yeah. That place is always rocking. It's a fun atmosphere to call games at. I really enjoy going there.
Hopefully no blizzard this year.
What's that?
Hopefully no blizzard in Iowa this year. Right before the game.
Let's hope so, because that was a mess. But
yes, I lived through it, so it was a mess.
Yeah, I'm excited that Stanford's coming to Bloomington. I think that's going to be a great non-conference test early in the season. It obviously won't be the same because Cameron Brink is gone and Kiki Iriafen is gone, and obviously Tara Vanderveer is gone. But it's still a good test against a named school early in the season. Last year, I thought we lacked that like marquee home non-conference game. We did not have one last year. Didn't feel like we really had a meaningful home game until New Year's Eve against Illinois. So it's nice to get one in November against Stanford that will draw some people, draw some attention nationally, and give Indiana a chance to kind of show themselves early. So those are the ones that stand out to me. We don't go to Nebraska. That's another place that I really enjoy going to because I think Pinnacle Bank Arena is one of the top women's basketball atmospheres in the conference. So I think dodging that one is helpful. But I would say Carver Hawkeye Arena, the Pacific Northwest are the two places I'm excited to go to.
Yeah. Cool.
Austin, I will hate to go on the record because they'll probably come back to bite me, but Seattle should not be bad, even if it's middle of January, because it just doesn't get that much snow. It really doesn't. It may rain. It may rain the whole time you're there, but you won't be getting 6 inches of snow.
I'll bring an umbrella. I'll walk around in the rain.
But if you get a chance, I've been to Seattle for a couple of days, and there are some great things to see down there. I can't remember the name of the market, but there's a market down there by Puget Sound and stuff. So with that, so just kind of Austin, I want to give you props. I mean, I'm not trying to say anything that and embarrass you or anything, but man, I listen to you on the radio and you do the game by yourself. I just, in basketball, at least there's the action going back and forth. I don't know how you do baseball by yourself because I mean, part of the allure of Vin Scully and the great radio announcers was obviously Vin Scully was in a class by himself, but usually there's that person you can kind of have a banter going back and forth with. You do such a great job on baseball of kind of creating a banner between you and the fans listen to you on there. And you do it a little bit on basketball, but basketball is a little bit more pace. But I guess kind of my question there is, you did a few games with Nikki last year. Are there any plans maybe to bring Nikki back or somebody else to fill in, do some games with you?
Well, first off, thank you. I don't know how I make it through baseball. Sometimes I'll get done with a baseball game and I'll be like, what did I say? Did I say anything in those 4 hours?
Awesome.
Yeah. It's a lot of having a conversation with myself, but on the Nikki front, we're working on that. I don't really have any details on that right now, but there is desire there from both myself and Nicole to have that partnership back. There's other things that have to fall into place for that to happen, but both she and I have been texting throughout the off season. We're hopeful that we'll get that squared away by the season start.
Yep. Awesome. Yeah, Jeff, I don't have any other questions. We've been going almost 40 minutes here. So
yeah, I want to get Austin out here. But just
we can make him, give us a bunch of predictions on June 19th already. I have already put him on the spot a bit. So
I think the transfer portal is still active. I don't know if
Yeah.
I don't know if we even have final teams right now.
No, I don't think we do either.
Real quick, Austin, just for somebody like me who's curious about what an announcer does in your off season. I mean, I realize you're still you have your gig with the radio station, but what do you guys do with your more free time in the summer here?
I try to do anything other than sports if I can. It's a lot of family time, vacations, and got to go home this past weekend, which was great, and play some golf. That's a big hobby of mine, so you'll probably see me on a golf course many a times this summer. But yeah, just trying to kind of lay low. I mean, it's from October to June. It's a lot of traveling. It's a lot of work. It's not a job. It's fun. I love every second of it. But I know my wife appreciates me being home here during the summer, so we got a lot of stuff to do around the house. So we keep ourselves busy. But I try to do anything but think about prep work and whatnot. With the podcast, that's a little different. I did make an 18-page cheat sheet on one page on each team in the Big Ten. So I'm prepared to talk to everybody on the podcast. But it really is a nice time right now. But if you talk to me by July 1st, I'll probably say that I'm itching to get back going again. But right now, I'm enjoying kind of laying back and taking it easy right now.
Yeah. Recharging. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Kathy, I'm going to throw it over to you. Any final thoughts or anything else for Austin?
Yeah, just again, Austin, thank you again for coming on. I will echo what Jeff said. I was able to pick you up and listen to the baseball games you called because a lot of them weren't on TV. And so I really thoroughly enjoyed listening to you. And honestly, when the women play, I do try to actually sync you and mute the TV announcers. So between you and then Don Fisher on the other side, those are whenever I can make that happen for either basketball team, it brings me a lot of joy. So thank you very much for all of that and for coming on and talking with us and for your new podcast. Because like I said, I really enjoyed your first episode, and I think it's going to add a nice mix of talking at a more high level about all the Big Ten teams. I know Jeff and I get pretty myopic focusing on Indiana. We do touch, a little bit on some of the other teams, but I'm sure not near what you'll be able to go into. So thank you for all of that. So it is June 19th. So we're not going to be making any bold predictions or anything and putting you on the spot or anything like that. But overall, I am too. I'm starting to get a little itchy. Jared actually Morris, for those of you who are our private Substack out there, if you're not, I'd encourage you to go and look at that. But Jared put out a question today about what everyone is doing now that basketball season's really kind of over. The non-conference or the non-season stuff, the transfer portal season, I guess, if you will, is done, and got all kinds of wide variety of answers on that, from things like you were saying, where folks are like, you know what, I just need to recharge. I'm tired of sports. Or Jeff talking about he just loves baseball, so he's all in on baseball. And for me, it's watching the Olympic swimming time trials right now and looking forward to Olympics. But it's nice during this time to still be able to have conversations about Indiana women's basketball and to have things to discuss, newcomers coming in and start putting our brains around the fact that we're going to have 4 new teams in the Big Ten. And so it was an absolute pleasure having you on again today. It always is. So that'll be my final thought, is just thank you very much for being here with us.
Austin, anything you want to wrap up with us and our fans?
Well, thank you for all the kind words, and I guess we're colleagues now on the Back Home Network.
That's
so
right.
I think my contract states I have to come on X amount of times on the Doing the Work podcast. So we're just checking boxes. No, I love coming on with you guys. You guys know I love talking Indiana women's basketball, and I just love talking about the Big Ten and women's basketball in general, which is why I started the podcast. And I hope that other people enjoy it as much as I hope I do. I really enjoyed talking to Megan in episode 1. I just got really, really excited for the season, just talking about all the possibilities, all the great players, all the great teams. We're going to have another episode on Monday. We're going to talk about transfer additions in the conference, and then we'll probably start pointing it kind of team-centered. So I'm super excited for that, and it's a nice project to keep me busy here in the summer.
Yeah, I want to echo what Kathy said. Just a pleasure to always have Austin on the show. And Austin, thank you. And good luck with the podcast. I'm looking forward to listening to each episode when they drop and getting you and your guest insights into Big Ten women's basketball.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate you having me on the show.
And our next show is going to be July 17th due to the 4th of July holiday and some other family commitments that we have. So our next podcast will be on July 17th. You can watch that here or wherever you get your podcast feed from. If you want to see us do the show live and be a part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@backhome-network. That's the @ symbol, youtube.com/@backhome-network. You can be a part of our private community as well. Find out more at assemblycall.substack.com. Special thanks to John Ringer of Rig Design for designing our logos. Big thank you to Bob Thompson for our music that you heard throughout the broadcast. And thank you for listening. We'll be back to talk IU hoops again with you on July 17th. Until then, keep your elbow in, your eyes on the rim, and let's go Hoosiers. All righty.
Great. Well, Jeff and I are never good about keeping it to half an hour. We say that like, yeah, we were 45. Sometimes we're like, okay, our goal is 45 minutes. And then we'll be like an hour in. We're like, all right, we need to shut the hell up now.
Yeah, mostly it's because I feel like at the 30-minute mark, if I'm going one-on-one with a guest, like I think I've probably exhausted most of the stuff that is important, and there's no need to stretch it unless I get a super big audience, and then we can start doing 2 guests a show or something like that. But
Right.
I like the half an hour mark just so it's something, because I find I listen to some podcasts that go 1.5 to 2 hours, and I got to listen to it like in different steps. Yeah, because I can't unless I'm on a like literal 2-hour trip. Like if I'm trying to mow the lawn, it only takes me 45 minutes, so I don't even get close to finishing the podcast. So I'm hopeful that the 30-minute, 35-minute mark is kind of a good one.
Yeah, that's what I kind of like listening to as well. I put, when I don't listen live, I put mine on 1.25 speed for almost all my podcasts that I listen to, so I can get through them pretty quickly. So
there you go.
Awesome.
Well, thank you guys for having me, and let me
much.
know. I'm always happy to jump back on.
Yeah,
Appreciate
absolutely.
it.
You too.
Appreciate it.
Awesome. See you guys.
See you, Austin. All right, Kathy.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.